Well, I am so privileged to be sitting next to author Colleen Coble. You have many books written, over 70, I think you said, correct?
Yes, a lot.
Yes, but before we get into your books, I always ask everybody to tell us a little about yourself.
Okay, well, my husband and I are actually going to be married 50 years in October.
Congratulations.
We have 3 grandkids. Our daughter Alexa is 12, and then we have 2 little grandsons. Elijah's almost 5, and Silas just turned 3, so we're all about those grandkids, and we like to travel, of course. I always like to visit my settings, and we live in a small town called Wabash, Indiana. On the banks of the Wabash River, and the canal boats used to go through there, so it's got a lot of history there, which is kind of where I first started, was with historical fiction because of all the history in town. I was interested in that, but my dream was always to kill people. I don't know why.
Well, I'm glad you're not doing it literally.
I grew up on mysteries, and so I was always drawn to the thought of writing murder mysteries, and my first books were for Barber. There were 18 of those, and those were a mixture of contemporary and historical romance. But there was always danger in them because that's just, I like to see justice happen, So that was my early starts, but I always wanted to write those murder mysteries, and I found a great agent, Karen Solem, and I've been with her now for 22 years, and she taught me so much about writing mysteries and the layers that you need for a bigger story, and so I've been able to do that, all these years now. I've been with Thomas Nelson 19 years this year, so wow. I've been with them and love my publishing house family, so that's really awesome.
Sure. So do you currently write historical fiction, or is it just kind of your romantic suspense?
It's just romantic suspense. I have a few times strayed into historical romantic suspense. After I went to Thomas Nelson, I was strictly writing contemporary, but there was a piece of me that missed that historical stuff. I would come places like this here in Little Falls and just be sucked into the mystery of the past and all that stuff, and I think, I want to write historical again. So I went to my editor and I said, what would you think about me writing a historical romantic mystery? There wasn't such a thing, really, at the time in Christian fiction. And she says, I don't know. And then she came back about 6 months later and said, I talked to the team, and they said, yeah, if you want to do that, you can. And so I wrote the Lighthouse series, the Mercy Falls series, and then I did a few more like that, but the majority of my work at Thomas Nelson is contemporary.
Okay. So how do you go about picking out your characters' names? I always like to ask an author that. I get different answers. So.
I have this really awesome book. It's called The Baby Name Survey Book, What People Think About Your Baby's Name. I know that sounds crazy. The thing is tattered and falling apart. But like if you're wanting a cowboy, it has names that people think cowboy. Or strong, or mermaid. I mean, this all across the bar, all kinds of things. And I'll look through there, I'll have an idea in my head of who that character is and his or her main strengths and weaknesses, and then find a name that's appropriate. And sometimes I'm wrong. I can remember sometimes I'm like almost to the end of a book and the name just isn't fitting. And so I have to go back to the drawing table and come up with a different name.
Sure. That's always interesting to hear people's process. I find that fascinating.
And sometimes I just come across not strange, but names I've not heard, and I write them down. Like right now, I've got a name in my head that I might use sometime. Paradise. Isn't that different? A different female name. So I don't know if I'll use it, but it kind of nags at me a little. So I probably will.
Sure, go for it. So then, how do you go about with your research on your suspense? I mean, do you go on? Do you get to go to the police department and ask how things are done, or how does
I do that, and I always make sure I visit the setting, because you really don't know a place until you've actually been there. And when I was doing my book set in Hawaii, we went to Kauai, and until I went there, I had no idea there were wild chickens running everywhere, crowing at 1 a.m. in the morning. Sure. Little details like that you just don't know. And then I like to go into coffee shops and local hangouts where the locals are hanging out and just listen in and see what's important in that area. When I was writing one of the Rock Harbor novels, it was about it was Abomination was the original title of it. Now they retitled it Haven of Swans, but I was just researching the area. So I read a lot of magazines and newspapers, and there was an article about how the trumpeter swan's habitat was being taken over by mute swans. And that whole swan thing led to the whole plot of the story, with ballet and the motive for the murder and everything. And so you just never know where those little pieces of things that you read or see take you in the story. So it's really a big deal.
Sure. Now, how do you stay creative after writing all those novels? You know, when you're coming up with your storyline and the character, you know, how do you do that?
Well, I'm always reading and I'm always researching, and there'll just be some little piece of something that'll stick. Like my series that I just finished, the Pelican Harbor series, I was down in Gulf Shores with our son's family, and they had friends that lived in the area, and we were out to dinner with them, and they had a 16-year-old son, Isaac, who had been working on a shrimping boat. And he said, "You would not believe the things we haul up in those nets." And he was talking about things like washing machines, and I suddenly had this vision of a body found dressed in a wedding dress in a refrigerator. I don't know. You know, people say, oh man, you're mine. But that was kind of the jumping off spot for the series. And somehow Jane Hardy, she was the police chief of the small town, just kind of came full blown to my head. And I wrote a whole series about her. Usually my series have different main protagonists in each book, but the Rock Harbor series is different than that, and then so was the Pelican one, and because Jane is the main character through all 3 books, and readers have loved that. And so I'm right now writing a new series set in Rock Harbor with another main protagonist, but Bree will play a major role too, and readers are just so excited that we're going back to Rock Harbor.
Yeah, it is fun to follow a character throughout the series, you know, and not just in like a C role or a B role, you know. Yeah, that's great. So what advice would you give to maybe somebody out there that's like, oh, I'd like to maybe give a shot at writing? You know, what have you learned all this time in your career?
The main thing I usually tell people is to read, because you kind of pick up by osmosis how to put a story together in the genre that you're interested in writing. And I am always reading a book on craft. Even though, you know, I've been writing all these years and have written as many books as I have, there's always something new to learn in writing, and that's why I love it, because you never really arrive. You know, there's always something new that you could learn, or something you can do better, a new twist that you haven't tried, you know, something like that. And so I love that. And so always be reading books on craft, and then also attend a good writers conference every year. Writing is a business, just like any other business. You have to invest in it if you want to go anywhere with it. And I'm CEO of American Christian Fiction Writers, so it really is the best. And I'm not saying that it's the best because of you know, I'm the head of the organization, but it really is. We have every year, it's in September, and we have editors and agents in the, you know, the best in the market are there. And so you can meet face to face with editors and agents. You can get an idea of what they're looking for, start making connections, find a critique partner. You know, Denise Hunter and I have been critique partners for 22 years, and we met at conference. Oh. So she lives an hour apart from me. She lives in Fort Wayne, and we can, you know, get together face to face. And she writes romance, and where I write romantic suspense, but she knows what needs to go into my books, and I know what goes into her books, and we are great critique partners and brainstormers, so it's really a big deal.
Oh, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and to talk about your books and give advice. You know, I greatly appreciate it.
Well, it was so fun to chat with you. I'm glad I made it, and glad I got to sit down and talk about it a little bit. It's always fun to talk writing, and it's been a long drought. You know, I've been able to be around other creative people and you know, just in general, just face to face with and talking about writing. It's so fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.